The Arizona sun hit the windshield like a hammer as I pulled Roxana's Honda Accord into the driveway. July in Scottsdale, the kind of heat that made the air shimmer and turned steering wheels into branding irons. I shifted into park, satisfied with myself. Got everything on the list. Even remembered that specific coffee brand she liked, the one with the blue label. Movement in the garage caught my eye. Earl stepped out, and I knew immediately something was wrong. His shoulders were tight. His jaw set in that way that meant trouble. I hadn't even opened the car door yet. He stormed toward me, closing the distance in long, aggressive strides. I got the door open and 1 foot on the driveway before he started. "You don't get to just take my car." His voice carried across the entire street. "You think you can do whatever you want around here." I straightened slowly, my hand still on the doorframe. "I asked Roxana this morning. She said it was fine for the grocery run." "I don't care what she said." He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the vein pulsing in his temple. "Stop taking my car. This is my property. You hear me? Mine." The heat rising from the asphalt wrapped around us both. I could feel neighbors watching, curtains moving in the house across the street, someone pausing their yard work 2 doors down. The weight of public shame pressed against my chest. "I understand you're upset, but you're living under our roof, eating our food, and you can't even respect basic boundaries." Earl's face was red now, his finger jabbing toward my chest without quite touching it. "You're a burden. Do you get that? A burden." The front door opened. Roxana stood there, one hand on the frame, her expression pained, but not surprised. Not surprised. That detail stuck with me, sharp as a knife. "Dad, please." Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Just don't provoke him. You know how he gets. Can we all just calm down?" Don't provoke him. As if I'd done something wrong, as if asking to borrow a car with permission was an act of aggression. I looked at the grocery bags visible through the back window. For bags of food I'd carefully selected, paid for with my pension money, trying to contribute to a household where I was clearly unwanted. The bags suddenly felt like evidence of something pathetic. My attempt to matter rendered meaningless by this man's contempt. I bent down, opened the rear door, and pulled out the bags. They were heavier than they should have been. Or maybe I was just tired. Tired of this. All of it. I set them down gently on the driveway concrete. A small act of control when everything else felt chaotic. Earl was still talking, something about respect and rules, but his words had become noise. I picked up the bags again and walked past both of them, past my daughter, who wouldn't defend me, past my son-in-law, who saw me as nothing. Neither of them said a word as I entered the house. That silence cut deeper than any of Earl's shouting. The door closed behind me with a soft click that sounded like finality. Hours later, after a dinner where no one spoke, and everyone pretended the driveway scene hadn't happened, I sat in my bedroom. Modest didn't even cover it. A single bed, a small desk, a dresser with a mirror that had seen better decades. This room hadn't changed in the 8 years since I'd moved in with them. Why would it? Poor pensioners don't redecorate. The house was quiet except for their voices downstairs, indistinct, but unmistakably about me. I could tell by the rhythm of it. The occasional rise in volume quickly hushed. I opened my laptop. The screen glowed in the dim room as I logged into my bank account. These movements were automatic after 15 years of secrecy. The careful typing, the 2-factor authentication, the moment when the numbers appeared. Investment portfolio, $1,427,394. The construction supply business I'd built over 30 years. Sold the year before my wife died. I'd been smart about it, patient, invested conservatively, lived on my pension and Social Security. Touched none of it. Why? Initially, I told myself it was to avoid being seen as a wallet, to keep relationships genuine, to not be the old man whose money made him interesting. Now, staring at those numbers, I understood the real reason. I'd been preparing. For what? I hadn't known until today. I could still feel the heat of that driveway, see the neighbors watching, hear Roxana's weak plea for me not to provoke the man who just humiliated me in public. Earl's sneer as he called me a burden. They thought I was nothing, less than nothing, an obligation, a dependent, a fixture they tolerated. I closed the laptop slowly, my hand steady on the lid. Something had shifted in the space between the driveway and this moment. Not anger. Anger was too hot, too reactive. This was colder, clearer. I straightened in my chair, my jaw set, and looked at the closed door of my room. My room in my house with my name on the deed. Details they'd conveniently forgotten. They wanted to see me as nothing. Fine. I'd show them exactly what nothing looked like. And then I'd show them what something looked like, what I'd been all along. I was already dressed and sitting in the living room when they came downstairs. Dawn had broken an hour ago, but I'd been awake much longer than that. Sleep had been impossible. My mind racing through possibilities, through plans, through the mathematics of revelation. Earl appeared first, barefoot, and scratching his stomach through his t-shirt. Roxana followed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. They moved through the kitchen with the easy comfort of people who owned the space. Their space. That's how they saw it. I sipped my coffee and watched from the archway. They didn't look at me, didn't acknowledge my presence. Roxana pulled out a pan for eggs. Earl scrolled through his phone, his thumb moving in lazy circles. The domesticity of it, the casual intimacy, the routine, made yesterday's cruelty even sharper. This was normal to them. I was furniture. We need to talk about the situation with your dad. Earl's voice carried easily from the kitchen. He wasn't whispering, wasn't even trying to be discreet. Roxana cracked an egg against the pan's edge. Oh, I know. It's awkward. Awkward. Earl set his phone down. He doesn't get it. He's living in our house now. The rules need to be clear. You're right. She stirred the eggs, her back to him, to me. He needs to understand how things work now. How things work now. As if the mechanics of my existence had fundamentally changed, and I'd somehow missed the memo. I stood, my coffee cup steady in my hand, and walked into the kitchen. They both looked up, startled. Had they forgotten I was here? Or had they simply stopped caring? My house. I kept my voice level factual. The deed is in my name. Reuben Watson. That hasn't changed. Earl's smirk came quick and easy. For now, sure, but let's be honest. Who's the real provider here? Who pays the bills? Keeps this place running? He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. You're just here. The implication hung in the air like smoke. They were waiting for the inheritance. Waiting for me to die, or become so incompetent they could take over. Either way, in their minds, this house was already theirs. Roxana looked uncomfortable, but said nothing. Her silence was louder than Earl's words. She wouldn't contradict him, wouldn't defend me again. I placed my coffee cup in the sink with deliberate care. I have errands to run. Errands? Earl's eyebrows rose. Where? Out. I grabbed my keys. I'll be back later. The confusion on their faces was satisfying. They expected a scene. I gave them calm control. I walked out through the front door, leaving them in their kitchen. The drive to the bank cleared my head. This wasn't anger. This was calculation and purpose. I'd spent 15 years playing small and had been dismissed and humiliated for it. At the bank, I met with my financial advisor, Marcus Chen. I want to make a significant withdrawal. A transfer, actually, for a vehicle purchase. What amount are we talking about? $420,000. Chen's professionalism held, and he initiated the transfer. I signed forms, feeling something I hadn't in years, anticipation. They thought I was nothing. I was about to shatter that assumption. 3 days later, I stood in a Phoenix showroom. I pointed to the vehicle, a Ghost Midnight Blue. At $185,000, it's priced very competitively, the consultant said. I'd like to purchase it today. No financing. Wire transfer. The funds are already available. 90 minutes later, I held the heavy keys. I started the engine. It purred with reserved power. I pulled onto the highway, heading toward Scottsdale. The Rolls-Royce moved like water. Other drivers stared. I was recalibrating everything. I thought humility would protect me from being used. I was wrong. They used me anyway. I approached a red light about 10 minutes from home. A silver Honda Accord pulled up beside me. Earl was behind the wheel of Roxana's car, focused on his phone. The moment was too perfect. I reached for the horn and pressed twice. Two sharp, clear notes. Earl's head jerked up. He looked around, confused, then turned toward my vehicle. I watched the sequence of emotions. Confusion, expensive car honking. Recognition, my face. Shock, the Rolls-Royce. Anger, turning his face red. I simply held his gaze, let a small smile touch the corner of my mouth, and when the light turned green, pressed the accelerator. The Rolls-Royce surged forward effortlessly. I maintained the speed limit, savoring every second. When I pulled into my driveway in front of my house, I positioned the Rolls-Royce prominently near the garage door. Let the neighbors see. Let everyone know. I sat for a moment, then exited, locked the vehicle with a satisfying electronic chirp, and walked to my front door. Inside, the house was quiet. I set my new keys on the entry table. In the kitchen, I poured water into a glass, then stood by the window, waiting. 15 minutes later, I heard it. An engine roaring up the street. Tires squealed as the Honda whipped into the driveway, stopping abruptly behind the Rolls-Royce. The car door slammed. Earl appeared in the kitchen doorway, face flushed deep red, breathing hard. Roxana emerged from the hallway, alarmed. Earl's arm shot out, finger pointing toward the front of the house. Where did you get the money? I took a slow sip of water, set the glass down. I think we need to have a conversation, Earl. A real one. Roxana moved closer. Dad, what's he talking about? What car? The accusations erupted from Earl. You've been hiding money, pretending to be broke while we paid for everything. We covered utilities, groceries, everything for 5 years, and you could have helped. Roxana's voice was quieter, but damning. Dad, you had money this whole time while we... I set my water glass down. Sit down, both of you. If you want answers, we'll do this properly. Roxana sat first. Earl remained standing a moment, then dropped into a chair. The power dynamic had shifted. I remained standing at the head of the table. 15 years ago, I began. I sold Watson Supply Company, the construction equipment business I built over 30 years. The sale price was $2.8 million. Roxana's mouth opened slightly. Earl's eyes narrowed. After taxes and paying off remaining business debts, I had just under $2 million. I invested conservatively. The current portfolio value is approximately $1.4 million. Earl's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and calculation. Roxana looked stricken. I never mentioned it, I continued, because I wanted to know my family valued me, not my bank account. Valued you. Earl's voice cracked. We paid for utilities, for groceries for 5 years, and you could have. Could have what? I cut him off. I offered multiple times. You refused. Remember? Roxana's eyes widened. 5 years ago you lost your job at Canyon Logistics. You asked to move in temporarily. I said yes immediately. But I also offered to pay my share of household expenses. You remember what you said, Earl? His jaw clenched. He remembered. You said a real man provides for his family. That you didn't need handouts from an old man. That it would be temporary anyway, just until you got back on your feet. So I didn't push. I bought my own groceries sometimes, contributed when you'd let me, but mostly I stayed quiet, stayed small, because you needed to feel like the provider, even though we were living in my house. That doesn't matter. You lied by omission, living in our house. My house. I walked to a drawer beside the refrigerator, pulled out a folder. The deed says Reuben Watson. Always has. I opened the folder on the table. The house deed. Purchased outright in 1998. Sole owner. No mortgage. Earl's face darkened. For now, he muttered. Roxana spoke, trembling. We assumed when you passed the house would be yours. You've been waiting for me to die. She flinched. Earl was less subtle. You're old. It's natural to plan for the future. But now we find out you've been hoarding money, living like a miser, letting us struggle. You have good jobs. You live rent-free. You pay a third of what you'd pay for a comparable house anywhere in Scottsdale. That's not struggle. You made us look like fools. Earl stood abruptly. This isn't over. You think you can just what? Flaunt your money? Humiliate me on the street with that car? You're going to regret this, making us look like fools. You'll see. Roxana stood too. Dad, how could you? How could you let us think? She followed Earl out of the kitchen. I heard them in the hallway, urgent whispers I couldn't quite make out. Then footsteps on the stairs, their bedroom door closing with force. I stood alone in my kitchen. The house felt different. The pretense was gone, but so was any illusion of family harmony. I walked to the front window and looked at the Rolls-Royce gleaming in the afternoon sun. Worth it. Yes, absolutely. I wasn't naive enough to think this was over. Earl's threat wasn't empty bluster. That was a man whose plans had just collapsed, whose self-image as superior provider had shattered. Dangerous. The silence from upstairs was too complete. They were talking up there, planning. I could feel it. I should probably feel worried. Instead, I felt alert, focused. I'd spent 5 years being walked over, dismissed, tolerated like furniture. Now they knew I wasn't helpless, wasn't poor, wasn't dependent. What would they do with that information? I returned to the kitchen and pulled out my laptop. Time to document everything. Every word said, every threat made. I opened a new document and began typing, recording the confrontation while details were fresh, protecting myself, because the war had begun in earnest, and I intended to win it. Morning light crept through my bedroom curtains. Around 6 a.m., I looked at the driveway. Something was wrong with the Rolls-Royce. The car sat too low, listing to one side. I dressed fast and headed downstairs. The house was silent. As I approached the vehicle, the damage was clear. All 4 tires were slashed. Scratches were scored deep into the midnight blue paint. On the driver's door panel, someone had carved the words, "Old Fool." I pulled out my phone and dialed the non-emergency police number. I walked back inside and checked the security system panel. The timeline jumped from midnight to 6 a.m. The system had been manually deactivated. What's going on? Earl stood at the top of the stairs, his tone carefully neutral. I looked up from the panel. The cameras were turned off last night from midnight until 6 o'clock this morning. Did you do that? He descended slowly. Oh yeah, I was cleaning the lenses yesterday evening. Forgot to reactivate the system. Why? What happened? Someone vandalized my car during that time. All 4 tires slashed. Paint scratched across the entire body. The word "fool" carved into the driver's door. His reaction was surprise, but not shock. What? That's terrible. Did you call the police? Roxana appeared behind him. What happened? I repeated the information. Her gesture of horror seemed genuine, but fear flickered in her eyes. 40 minutes later, Detective Harris, who handled property crimes, arrived. He walked around the Rolls-Royce slowly. When did you purchase this vehicle? 3 days ago. Any recent conflicts, arguments with neighbors, business disputes? I provided a measured answer. I've been having some family tensions. My daughter and son-in-law live with me. There was a disagreement yesterday about finances. Harris questioned Earl and Roxana. Earl repeated his story about cleaning the lenses and denied hearing anything. Harris looked between the 3 of us. Convenient timing. Argument about money. Then expensive car gets damaged the same night, and the security system happened to be off during those exact hours. You see why this looks suspicious. Earl stiffened. Are you accusing me of something? Because I didn't do anything. I was asleep all night. Harris shook his head. Without video evidence or witnesses, there's not much to pursue criminally. He turned to me. The repair estimate I'd received was $35,000, felony-level damage. If you develop any information about who might have done this, call me directly. After Harris left, the damaged Rolls-Royce sat between us like an accusation. I hope they catch whoever did. This, Roxana said quietly. Earl nodded. Yeah, terrible thing. But I saw the poorly concealed satisfaction in his eyes. He thought he'd won something. He was wrong. This just changed the rules. I looked at Detective Harris's card, then at Earl. Yes, I hope they do too. The meaning was clear. I know it was you. Earl's smile faded slightly. Later, after the tow truck had taken the Rolls-Royce away, I sat in my room. The vandalism was documented, but Harris was clear. No immediate criminal charges. It was all just evidence. Evidence that the boundary had been crossed. They had moved from disrespect to crime. They gave me justification. I opened a new browser tab and typed, Arizona tenant rights, family eviction Arizona, unlawful detainer Arizona. 2 days after the vandalism, I drove my old Camry to the office of Thomas Brennan, an attorney specializing in property law and family disputes. I laid out the situation. 5 years ago, I agreed to let Earl and Roxana move into my house, based on an oral agreement to contribute to expenses and maintenance. They settled in, treating me like an inconvenience waiting to die so they could inherit. The recent crisis, the confrontation, the revelation of my wealth, and the $35,000 felony-level vandalism of my new Rolls Royce, which occurred while Earl conveniently had the security cameras deactivated. I showed him the clear title proving the property was solely in my name, with no mortgage. Brennan was direct. You have strong legal standing. Arizona law allows property owners to terminate occupancy permission, even for family, especially when oral agreement terms are violated. Brennan outlined the plan to ensure the eviction couldn't be challenged. New will and trust. What does your current will say? I confirmed it left everything to Roxana. I want to change that. 90% to charities, 10% to Roxana. Brennan noted this proved sound mind while protecting the majority of the estate. Formal notice. Send a formal letter to Earl and Roxana documenting the breach of the oral agreement and modifying the terms. They must start contributing financially or vacate within 30 days. Documentation. I must keep a detailed log of every hostile interaction, failure to contribute, and concerning behavior, photos, notes, dates, times, to build the case for formal eviction proceedings, unlawful detainer, if they refuse to leave. How long does the process typically take? If they fight it, 2 to 3 months from notice to final eviction order. I wrote a check for the retainer. I don't want drama. I want this done correctly, legally, so it can't be challenged later. Brennan nodded. That's exactly the right approach. Emotion loses cases. Documentation wins them. We shook hands again. I left the office carrying the empty leather folder. I'd left copies of everything with Brennan. Walking to my car in the parking structure, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, control. Not revenge exactly, but agency. The sense that I was finally acting instead of reacting. The legal machinery was beginning to turn. I sat in my car before starting the engine, taking a moment to just breathe. Then I pulled out my phone and texted the Rolls-Royce repair facility about pickup timing. Their response came immediately. Ready for pickup Friday afternoon. I smiled. Everything was moving forward. By this time next week, Earl and Roxana would have the formal letter. The countdown would begin, and they'd finally understand I wasn't the helpless old man they'd mistaken me for. A week passed. 7 days of careful documentation in my log. Earl's dismissive comments, Roxana's avoidance, the continued lack of household help. I was building a case brick by brick. This afternoon, I walked to the mailbox and received a certified letter. The return address was Marshall and Associates, Scottsdale. In my room, I opened the envelope. Earl had hired an attorney, and he was on the offensive. The letter claimed Earl and Roxana had provided essential care and support for me for 5 years and demanded $180,000 in fair compensation for these unrequested, unprovided services. But the most concerning part was the veiled threat. The letter cited the Rolls-Royce purchase as potentially indicative of diminished judgment in an individual of advanced age. They were threatening a competency challenge. I read it a third time. The language was aggressive but vague. Heavy on insinuation, light on specifics. Earl was trying to preemptively strike, making me seem like the aggressor. I immediately scanned and emailed the letter to Brennan. He called back 20 minutes later. First reaction? It's weak. Aggressive language covering a fundamentally weak position, Brennan said. The compensation claim is ridiculous without a written contract. The competency threat is even worse. Any judge would laugh it out of court. But it shows Earl is scared. He spent money on an attorney. We'll send our notice to quit as planned. Let them know their counterattack failed to intimidate you. That evening, Roxana knocked on my bedroom door. Dad, can we talk? Her eyes were red. I know you got the letter from Earl's lawyer. Dad, this is getting out of control. We shouldn't be threatening each other with lawyers and an eviction. Can't we find a compromise? What compromise, Roxana? I compromise my home, my dignity, my right to be treated with basic respect in the house I own. She flinched. It's not like that. Earl is just stressed, and then you bought that car without telling us. And it felt like you were hiding things, not trusting us. I don't have to tell you about my purchases. And I wasn't hiding money. You assumed I had none because I lived modestly. That was your assumption, not my deception. Her mask slipped. We thought when you passed the house would be ours. We've been planning for that. And now you're saying. Now you know inheritance isn't guaranteed. That I might live another 20 years. That I might change my will. That you can't just wait me out. I do love you, Dad. You're my father. Then you should have acted like it mattered. Love is action, not just words. You acted like I was a burden to tolerate. Now live with those consequences. He won't leave without a fight. I know, I said quietly. She stood. I'm sorry. For what that's worth now. Then she was gone. I knew that compromise meant surrender. I added notes to my log. Roxana's admission about inheritance planning and her acknowledgement of Earl's behavior. My phone buzzed. Text from Brennan. Notice to quit drafted. Sheriff's office service scheduled for Friday morning. Are you ready for this? I typed back one word. Yes. I stared at that reply on my phone screen, my thumb hovering over the send button for just a moment. Then I pressed it. The machinery of eviction was now inevitable. On Friday morning, I sat in Brennan's office. 2 witnesses and a notary public were present. This is now your valid will, superseding all previous versions, Brennan said. The estate value was calculated at $2.45 million. Roxana's inheritance was now $245,000, down from the estimated $2.4 million she expected. I signed my name on each page. My hand was steady. The notice to quit service is scheduled for 1 p.m. at your residence, Brennan said. I recommend you be present. Shows resolve. Driving home, I read an email from Detective Harris. Investigation concluded due to lack of evidence, but the report would reflect suspicious circumstances and note persons with access and potential motive. Useful documentation. I arrived home at 11 a.m. At 12:58 p.m., a Maricopa County Sheriff's cruiser pulled up. Roxana appeared on the stairs, her face pale when she saw the uniform. The deputy served her the manila envelope. What is this? Notice to quit. You'll need to read it carefully. Roxana opened the multi-page document. You're evicting us? I'm terminating an arrangement that stopped working years ago. You have 30 days to find alternative housing. 30 minutes later, Earl's car screeched into the driveway. He burst through the front door, waving the papers. What the hell is this? Exactly what it says. Notice to quit. 30 days. This is insane. You can't just kick us out. This is our home. It's my home. You've been guests who violated their welcome. This is legally sound. Earl paced, reading the document. The language was precise. Notice to quit based on violation of oral agreement regarding household contributions, creation of hostile living environment, and suspected involvement in property damage. The vandalism you're accusing us of. I'm noting that the detective's report contains suspicions about persons with access. That's factual. Where are we supposed to go? The financial reality hit him. Roxana spoke, voice small. Dad, please, we'll change. Earl will apologize. We'll start paying rent, helping out, whatever you want. Just give us another chance. I remembered the 5 years of disrespect. No, this is done. Earl tried the emotional wound. You're choosing pride over family, money over blood. When you're old and alone in this big house, you'll regret this. I'm already alone, Earl. I've been alone in this house for 5 years, while living with 2 people who saw me as an obstacle to inheritance. At least now I'll be alone with dignity. Earl stormed toward the stairs. 30 days will be gone, but don't expect a relationship after this. Roxana lingered. I have to go with him. He's my husband. I know, I said. She followed Earl upstairs. Doors slammed. Voices rose in heated argument. I stood in my kitchen, my coffee cold. The house was becoming mine again. 3 weeks later, the atmosphere was arctic. I continued to document their hostile behavior. 5 days before the deadline, a certified letter arrived. Earl's attorney had filed for a hearing to challenge the eviction, claiming established oral tenancy rights based on 5 years of residence. Brennan called. This is expected. They're grasping. The hearing is scheduled for today, exactly at the deadline. Doesn't help their credibility. This morning, I dressed carefully. Dark slacks, button-down shirt, sport coat, professional, composed, unshakable. This ended today. The Maricopa County Superior Court building rose from downtown Phoenix. I met Brennan in the hallway. He looked ready. We entered the courtroom. Earl and Roxana sat opposite with their attorney, Marshall. Judge Morrison presided. Marshall presented his case first, arguing established tenancy based on 5 years of continuous residence, verbal agreement for permanent housing, and contributions to household support. He painted them as caregivers and me as ungrateful. Brennan's response was methodical and devastating. Property deed, proving my sole ownership. Oral agreement terms, email evidence stating their stay was temporary, while you get back on your feet, and conditional on household maintenance. Refusal to contribute, my testimony that I repeatedly offered to pay my share, but Earl refused, wanting to appear as the provider. Vandalism evidence, photos of the Rolls-Royce damage, Detective Harris's report noting suspicious circumstances, and the convenient security camera malfunction. Hostile environment, a recording of Earl saying, "The old man doesn't understand. This is our house now. We're just waiting him out." Judge Morrison addressed Earl directly, questioning the specifics of the household help. Earl's response was weak and vague. I explained my timing. The disrespect escalated. When I revealed I wasn't financially dependent on them, the hostility became unbearable. My vehicle was vandalized. I no longer feel safe or respected in my own home. Judge Morrison delivered the ruling. Mr. Watson owns the property outright. The respondents are not tenants under Arizona law. They were guests under an oral agreement that specified certain responsibilities. The evidence shows they failed to meet those responsibilities and created a hostile environment. The gavel came down. The eviction is upheld. You have 30 days from today's date to vacate the premises. Earl shot to his feet, pleading, "Can't we work something out? We'll pay rent, sign a lease, whatever." Judge Morrison was firm. The property owner is not obligated to continue housing you. The hearing is concluded. Every eye turned to me. I spoke quietly, but clearly. "No, I want you gone from my home." Outside, Brennan shook my hand. Clean victory.